Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A Conservative minister has risked reopening the so-called Dementia Tax row by suggesting elderly people should sell their homes in order to pay for their care needs. Footage has emerged of the Health Minister, Jackie Doyle-Price, talking at a fringe meeting at last week's party conference and arguing it's unfair for younger taxpayers to be propping up people to keep their property.
We've got to a stage where people feel that they are the custodian of an asset to give to their offspring. But actually we need to get back to a stage where actually homes are for living. They shouldn't be seen as that. People are now, well into their pension ages, sitting in homes that really are too big for their needs. And we do need to start having those conversations about what's appropriate earlier.
So, should people be able to pass on their homes to their children, or is it only fair that those homeowners are then using those homes to pay for their care? Great question. The Guardian columnist Owen Jones joining us from Whitechapel in East London. Kate Andrews, news editor at the Institute of Economic Affairs, is in our Westminster studio for us now. Hello to you both. Kate, to you first of all, what do you think?
I don't think that this should be a choice between whether or not you can access social care or keep your home. That's not a fair choice. Fundamentally, this policy at the moment is not fit for purpose. What the government should be doing is looking to the rest of Europe, where you have insurance-style systems where people can insure their homes and their assets over the course of their life against the social care that they might need later down the line. We need to be looking at a pre-funded NHS. At the moment, the pay-as-you-go system just isn't working. The burden is falling on young working people in order to top up what is a demographic that is only aging more and more. It's just not sustainable. So we need to be looking at, some pretty bold policy reform, but I don't think that the policy of this dementia tax is fit for purpose as it stands now.
Owen, should you be able to keep your home and get the state to pay for your care?
Well, again, it just shows pensioners can't trust the Conservatives. The Tories made a strategic decision in the election that pensioners would vote for them come what may, which is why we ended up with the so-called dementia tax. I have to say, the number of U-turns on this, they U-turned on it during the election campaign, they U-turned on it afterwards, completely abandoning it, and now they're talking about U-turning all over again. To quote the philosopher Tommy Rowe, "Dizzy, my head is spinning like a whirlpool, it never ends." It's just astonishing the number of U-turns they've done on this. But the critical point about the dementia tax is this. If, God forbid, you get cancer, you get a heart condition, then the state, the NHS, will look after you. The problem with this is if you get a condition like dementia, you are singled out and expected to pay for it with your home. That's fundamentally unfair. It discriminates based on the condition you get. Now, many of us have had relatives with dementia. It's a terrible illness to have, but this is not how you pay for it. And indeed, under the Conservatives, tens of thousands of social care jobs were lost because of billions of pounds worth of cuts, because of the austerity they've pursued over the last few years. The way of addressing that is to ask the top 5% to pay a bit more in tax, to increase corporation tax back to where it was in 2011, still lower than a lot of industrialised countries, I might add, and to level a financial transaction tax. That will raise tens of billions of pounds, part of which can go towards a social care system, and as Labour are suggesting themselves, to have a national care system that's integrated, because at the moment it's chaotic, it's piecemeal, it's a lottery system. Older people built this country up. The least they deserve is security and dignity in retirement. We can afford it, but it does mean asking those at the top to pay a bit more money.
Is that reasonable, Kate?
I think Owen nails the point about unfairness. If you get cancer, then it's covered. If you get dementia, then it's not. It's a very good point. But the problem is that I'm not hearing any credible policy solutions. The truth of the matter is that we're already taking about 38–39% of GDP in via tax. That is the highest that you can get. Historically, you really can't get more tax than around that percentage. And we're spending roughly 45% of GDP, which is why we still have that massive deficit. And the truth of the matter is that young people will pay for this down the line. Money spent 1% is money borrowed that has to be paid back. And we hear about increasing corporation tax, but my goodness, what hasn't Jeremy Corbyn pledged to spend corporation tax on? Apparently it's going to pay for social care. It's also going to pay for his education promises that amount to something like £20 billion. It's going to pay for A&E services. It's going to pay for lifting the public sector pay cap. This is not realistic, and I think the public knows that there isn't this unlimited amount of funds out there, so we have to start making some tough calls. I don't think that the dementia tax is actually the right way to go about it, but my goodness, pledging all of this extra money that's apparently going to come off of some magic money tree isn't the right solution either, and I would love for the Labour Party or any party to start talking about intergenerational unfairness. How are we going to get these people who can't even get on the housing ladder into a position where they're not paying for other people to sustain their houses, their social care down the road? We have to have these hard conversations, and to simply blame the Conservatives or to blame any party isn't particularly helpful.
Owen?
Well, the difference is, and I know Kate's not going to defend the Conservatives on this point, to be fair, but Labour costed its manifesto in full last time. The Conservatives didn't. There wasn't a single pound sign in the Conservative manifesto, so arrogant were they in believing that the election was in the bag. It is costed, and the point about intergenerational fairness
going to increase taxes
yes, it is, Kate. It was costed, and indeed, Kate, the difference is you can be both pro-young and you can be pro-old. Okay, you can be both pro-youth and pro-old, and the argument Labour have been making, and they costed in their manifesto, was to get rid of tuition fees, which saddles younger people with debt for daring to dream and aspire to a university education, whilst dealing with a social care crisis. Now, there is an alternative. We agree the deficit needs to come down in this country, and the way we do that isn't with the old failed model, which created lots of low-paid jobs where people paid less tax, paid less money into the economy. That's why, contrary to the Conservatives' promise, they said they'd wipe out the deficit by 2015, if you remember. I think it's now 2025. They keep kicking the can down the road endlessly. It's to pursue a policy of growth to deal with our productivity crisis, which is absolutely astonishing, to deal with our fallen living standards, which is now the worst now, according to the IFS, since the 1750s, which is quite a long time ago, to say the least. Our economic model is fundamentally broken, and that's the reason we still have this huge deficit. But we can deal with urgent problems like ensuring older people in retirement have security and decency and dignity without, if you like, pitting the generations against each other.
Okay.
You can be pro-youth and pro-old at the same time, but what you can't do is promise to fund the triple lock on state pensions and get rid of university tuition fees and build, thousands upon thousands of government-sponsored homes and keep the winter fuel allowance. You can't promise to do all these things when you just don't have the money to do it. We've actually raised more via corporation tax by bringing down the percentage. So when Labour comes along and says it's going to bring it back up to 26%, there's good historical reason to think that we'll actually get less tax revenue from that. These were not fully costed policies. No political party at the moment is having those tough conversations about what we have to do to make things like healthcare and social care manageable in the future. And I think that, to me, is what's so deeply frustrating. You talk about having a system that's pro-growth. Well, trying to crack down on corporations and try to tax people out of their income is not pro-growth. And it's so confusing to me that on this particular topic, the Labour Party and Owen, you're saying that it's okay, you have the right to keep your home, but you don't have the right to keep your income. We're going to take more and more of that from you. You're just picking and choosing where you want to go into people's homes and take over what they have and where you don't. And it seems to be a decision that's based on what the Conservatives are saying just to be in opposition to them. Makes no sense.
Okay, come back on that, Owen.
No, Kate, look. Kate, we've gone through the longest squeeze in wages now since the 1750s, but it's been boom time for those at the top. Indeed, the wealth of the richest 1,000 people in this country doubled during one of the worst economic crises that we've seen in our history. The ratio between pay between CEOs and workers in this country has exploded over the last few decades. What we're simply asking in this country, increasingly, tens of millions of people, is to say, look, people at the top are doing very, very well. They can afford to pay a bit more tax, and we can use that to invest in the economy. And the problem with investment in this country is we've de facto had an investment strike where companies have not been investing. We need to stimulate growth in this country, but that means the state actually investing in the economy, updating our crumbling infrastructure, for example.
Since the 1970s,
yes,
real
there are other
incomes
things we need to do. For example,
in the UK, thanks to capitalism,
dealing with
not
it in
socialist policies like what you're proposing.
Kate, since 2008, as you're fully aware, we've had the longest squeeze in living standards of any industrialised country other than Greece. That's simply not sustainable, and it's bad for the deficit, because when people don't have money, When people don't have pennies in their pockets, Kate, they don't go out and spend it, and they pay less in tax, and we spend more money as taxpayers on in-work benefits, subsidising that low pay. That's why we need an industrial strategy that creates better paid jobs, where people invest their money in the economy, and we spend less money in in-work benefits.
Guys,
and then we'll have more money to spend on social care.
Desperate time. I really appreciate you both joining us. Please come back soon, and we'll debate it further. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thanks a lot.